Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Friday fun as usual. How you doing, Amber?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I was just saying I feel like a shoe in the dryer this week because of how chaotic it's been, but I am getting it together. You said your week's been pretty good?
Relatively smooth, but we'll see. Fridays are always.
I don't want to shake it up too much.
I
We're
know.
gonna have some good conversation.
That's right.
And keep it going.
Coming up on Rising, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on charges of giving false statements and obstructing a congressional proceeding.
Plus, former President Barack Obama is not holding back, blasting the Trump administration over their claims about Tylenol.
And could Charlie Kirk be featured on American currency? Well, some Republicans are trying to make that happen. But first, Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Okay, lots to talk about. So during an Oval Office news conference yesterday, current President Trump had a warning for what he called radical left Democrats. He suggested that if the rhetoric and violence continue, the right may eventually respond in kind. Take a look.
The radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them.
And then he doubled down. Take a look.
I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left. But the right's not doing this. They're not doing it. And they better not get them energized, because it won't be good for the left.
Now, these words weren't delivered at a campaign rally. They came straight from the Oval Office. They landed at a time when America is already on the edge after the deadly shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. According to Axios, our nation has seen more high-profile assassination attempts in the last 14 months than any other point since the murders of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in the 1960s. That includes 2 attempts on Trump himself, the killing of a Democratic Minnesota lawmaker, and an arson attack on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home. Now, in this climate especially, words matter, but instead of de-escalating, President Trump is striking the matches. And the result is predictable. Calls for violence, and there's even been civil war conversations spreading across social media. MAGA influencers are declaring, quote, war on the left, even as Democrats across the board have condemned Kirk's murder. Still, here's Trump again, this time at Charlie Kirk's own memorial service.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
So that's not good leadership. That's an ego with a microphone. Presidential leadership, real leadership, means calling the nation and calming the nation, not pouring gasoline on a fire that's already burning. It doesn't mean silencing debate, but it does mean drawing a line between disagreement and dehumanization. Because disagreeing with someone's politics is not the same as endorsing their murder. Suggesting otherwise isn't just dishonest, it's dangerous. At the end of the day, presidents set the tone. So when tragedy strikes, the job is simple. Even if it isn't easy, comfort the country, call for unity, and make sure civil discourse survives. Right now, we don't need someone daring Americans to fight one another. We need someone reminding us why democracy is worth fighting for together.
All right, so I would start by saying that I did not like Trump's comments in the Oval Office regarding the insinuation that Republicans would respond in kind with violence to left-wing attacks. I think one of the beautiful things that we've seen in the aftermath of Charlie's death is that we haven't seen a Republican violent response. We've seen prayer vigils, we've seen memorial services, we've seen political donations, political mobilization, and that's where it should stay. I do think the comments made at the memorial service from Trump are a little bit different, where he talked about, I do hate my opponents and I don't want what's best for him. For me, that moment was really about comparing and contrasting himself with Charlie Kirk's Christian message. And he says in the aftermath of those comments, I'm sorry, Erica, maybe you can change my mind. And to me, that was a delineation of Charlie. He's sort of acknowledging that Charlie was a better man and a better Christian than him, and acknowledging how difficult it is not to hate people who disagree with you. So I didn't think that was quite on the same level as what he said in the Oval Office.
And also, I thought that Erica Kirk's speech was so beautiful. Just the moment that she was able to say, forgiving someone who just murdered her husband is something unfathomable, right, even as I was a viewer at home. So I think that it almost took away from what a beautiful moment that was, to have the president of our country with an opportunity to create and foster unity, continue on a message that is not really unifying. And I know he said Erica can teach him some things, and it was maybe in jest, but too many times I think we give President Trump the past of things being in jest or things being, that's just the way he is. You know, he's not your average person. We didn't vote for this uptight politician. But I just know that, in fact, in the past, when we've had extreme tragedy, even most recently in Texas at the ICE facility, immediately he's jumping to figure out who to blame instead of saying this murderer needs to, well, the man unfortunately killed himself, so he can't be brought to justice. But it's like, you know, immediately we shouldn't jump to trying to figure out who to point fingers at. And that happens on both sides of the aisle. But I just wish that also on top of that, we're not escalating, especially making dangerous conversations like you don't really get into a brawl or a back-to-back with the right because we're tougher. Like, we're at the end of the day a nation who all wants the same things, right? We all want freedom, peace for our children, a better life for ourselves. We want the American dream. And I just feel like we're losing a sense of that with how insensitive I think all of us have become with social media and everything, with things just kind of pass in the wind and are not, I don't know. And maybe I'm clutching my pearls too much, but I just feel like that we could do better.
Yeah, look, I want calls for unity. I want the nation to be unified, but one of the things that really troubled me after Charlie's murder, agreeing with a lot of the things that he said and being part of the conservative movement, was learning how many self-identified liberals are willing to justify political violence, whether it was the thousands of TikToks that we saw from people who are in positions of relative authority, like healthcare workers or teachers. And then also hearing ABC News anchors or commentators, rather, saying that Charlie brought him on himself because he was spreading hate. Multiple Democrats refusing to sign on to the resolution in Congress to honor Charlie Kirk, saying, well, we didn't agree with what he said. Well, that shouldn't matter, right? Honoring his life doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that he said. And then the YouGov poll showing, again, a significant percentage of self-identified liberals agreeing with political violence in some circumstances. As someone who sits on the right side of the aisle, to know that so many of my fellow Americans hate me and would celebrate if I was dead is deeply concerning.
For sure. And I think it's right to condemn, or if people want to fire in private companies, people who do things that are egregious across the board. We've talked about that even last week. And I do think that the companies have the right to do that, and people should not be so negative online. That's one of the reasons why X has become a little disturbing to me, because I feel like a lot of people who are not in positions of power still have access to social media, hide behind avatars, and kind of say the worst of things, everything that pops into their head. But I do know that as I tried to scour and find a Democratic leader say anything other than that this was a tragedy. I mean, at the top level, from Newsom to Kamala down to local politicians that were Democratic, they all had to say that this political violence cannot stand in our country. This is un-American, and a similar message. So even though there are people online, we can't control the masses. If you're saying of liberal people online, just like we can't control the masses of people.
I agree that most of them are not Democratic leaders that are outright celebrating, but I have found that the Democratic response has fallen short in a lot of instances. I mean, you had Ilhan Omar smearing this guy and tarnishing his memory, speaking ill of the dead within days after he passed, accusing him of being a racist and a hate monger. There were other Democrats as well who felt the need to speak on his legacy when they were taking out of context or manipulated quotes that weren't even true. To me, that just fuels the fire.
Well, I think that you can think that the way that someone was killed and losing a life is reprehensible, but at the same time, you don't have to change your mind and agree with them because their stances are something you particularly stand by.
I know,
when they were alive. We could have definitely, but I mean, even in Congress, like a lot of those Congress people said
that they're condemning.
Well, a lot of people in Congress said they do want to push a bill forward to stop political violence. They don't think it needs to be in Charlie Kirk's name, and that has to be a comfortable conversation to have at this point because it's our government, and it doesn't have to be, but it can be. And some people proposed that, and others said, no, let's just make a bill about political violence. So I don't think that Democrats were not on board for that.
Well, I mean, he was the one who was assassinated, though. So to be like, well, we're not.
But we should do it in the Minnesota lawmakers' name as well. That's what I mean. There's a lot of people we could do it in their name.
I know.
We can do it in all.
A lot of people bring up the Hortman thing, and look, I understand that was a tragedy, and Republicans across the board condemned it. I mean, the Mike Lee joke, I think we both agree, should and was condemned by basically everybody. But the reality is, no one knew who they were before they were killed. And so trying to elevate them to the level of Charlie Kirk to say, like,
wait, having a position that's actually a congressional position versus someone who's outside of Congress who just had influence, somebody should be held at a higher regard than the other person when they pass?
My point is that the Democrats are often bring that case up as they're supposed to have the same level of influence that Charlie did, or that the same number of people who knew them. It's a tragedy nonetheless, but it's not the same.
But even with Gabrielle Gifford, right, we could have put it in her name. There's so many instances where we have an opportunity to put it in everyone's name who was a victim of political violence. And some people just said maybe not only Charlie Kirk, and that conversation it shouldn't offend people. It should just be open to dialogue and wanting to solve the issue of political violence, no matter what it's called.
It just seems to me like a rather weird thing to get hung up about, is that it's in Charlie's name when he was the person who was assassinated. That's all I'm saying.
We'll talk about it a lot more. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted. His response coming up. We'll be right back.